Is another way to prep. Discovery does not prevent other sex.
To kids, they can actually start eating beef a lot earlier than you think. Juju has been eating beef since 7 months old, I think.
Right around 6 months, 5-6 months.
At first it was just ground beef and purees, and now he loves steak.
Who is USAA made for? It's made for him, a veteran who honorably served. And it's made for her, who's she's serving now. We also make USAA for military spouses and their kids. Become a member. Get an insurance quote today.
Step up, prep up to help keep you free from the risk of HIV. Discovery for PrEP, a once-daily prescription medicine that helps lower the chances of getting HIV through sex. It's not for everyone. Discovery for PrEP has not been studied in people assigned female at birth. Talk to your doctor to find out if it's right for you. Discovery is another way to PrEP. Discovery does not prevent other sex.
Reminds me, I need to clean my gun in real life.
And you have also formed the opinion that this was an unconscious neck restraint. Is that correct?
What you mean?
Oh, excuse me, a conscious neck restraint.
Yes.
Okay. You're familiar, you testified on direct examination that it is contrary to the training that you've received to place your neck or
Your knee
on a subject's neck.
True.
Counselor, if I can clarify, it is contrary to our training to indefinitely place your knee on a prone, handcuffed individual for an indefinite period of time.
So the issue that you take with it is the length of time?
Counselor, there's a couple of issues, and one of those, again, is, as you've noted, receiving the information. Is the person a threat to the officers or others? What is the severity of the crime? Are you reevaluating and assessing the person's medical condition? So all of that critical thinking, that's really key for me in terms of why I vehemently disagree that was the appropriate use of force for that situation.
Okay. Now, when we talk about that critical decision-making model, that critical decision-making model doesn't only apply to the specific subject that you have under your control, correct?
What the fuck you mean by that?
So we're talking about the bystanders?
Would you mind moving the microphone back just a little?
Your Honor, my apologies.
No problem.
I think we just got a loud voice. That's it. Well, I'm talking about bystanders. I'm talking about other officers. I'm talking about other things that come into play in terms of the officer's critical decision making.
Woo, the excuses your ass is pulling, you bitch!
Sure. When an officer is engaged in the use of force, and I'll just phrase it as a yes or no, their attention is not exclusively necessarily focused on the subject of for whom they have in custody. Agreed or disagree?
That's a horrible leading question, sir.
The officer that is engaging in the use of force.
You have to be focused.
Other matters? Correct. Yes.
Right, and in fact...
Yo, you try to say the bystander's fault. You a bitch, bro. You fucking bitch.
Advantage or disadvantage, agreed?
One of the portions of it.
Right. Specifically in the policy, de-escalation has to be applied, assuming that it's safe to do so, right?
Yes.
and all other tactical considerations.
Wants to create more enemies. More
The
chaos.
policy says.
Yes.
And in terms of
I love that.
those decision-making, an officer, it's not a singular decision-making process that's happening in the course of an arrest. Agreed?
Yes.
Maybe he could
So
have
an
done something.
officer
I
has to
feel
be concerned about other things that are known to him at that time. Agreed?
Yes.
So some of those things would be what just happened between me and this subject a few minutes ago, right?
What about
Yes.
loyalty?
I just fought with this subject a few minutes ago. I'm talking generally. I just fought with this person generally a few minutes ago. He now seems to be not resisting, but that doesn't mean he can't resist again, right?
Yes.
Even if he's handcuffed, right?
Yes.
And so even if he's handcuffed, someone could still they're not threatless if they're handcuffed. Agreed?
And Counselor, this is just general.
General.
Yes.
Right. Someone who is handcuffed can be equally as a threat to an officer as someone who's not handcuffed.
Yes.
They can kick, they can bite, they can spit, they can do all sorts of things. Agreed?
Yes.
Finally found our calling in life.
Now, in terms of
Tried this thing out on the bridge.
the use, so I just want to make sure you form the opinion that this was a conscious, an unconscious neck restraint. Right?
Counselor,
On May 25th of 2020.
that it was a conscious neck restraint.
Conscious neck restraint.
Yes.
Okay. Now, again, in this whole de-escalation, officers have to take into consideration the safety of the crowd, right?
Yes.
They have to take into account the reactions of the crowd, whether they're angry or hostile or just simply watching, right?
Yes.
It's all a part of this critical decision making, right?
Yes.
They have to be aware of their surroundings, right? Generally speaking. Being at a busy street versus being in a park, right?
Yes.
Different decisions go into that, right?
Yes.
Knowing that I have other officers that are in place and may be at risk as well, right?
Yes.
So there's lots of, the critical decision-making model is not singular in its application.
That's correct.
Lots of information coming in very rapidly, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to show you first, and I believe by stipulation, or at least without objection, I'm going to play a few minutes, or excuse me, a few seconds of Miss Frazier's Facebook video. So at this time, I'd offer Exhibit 1018.
No objection.
Permission to publish.
1018 is received. You may publish.
Oh, pause it here, sorry. This appears to be sort of that time, that picture that was shown to you earlier, Exhibit 19. This is that general time frame that picture appears to be taken from.
Counselor, yes. I'm sorry. Was that here for the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. This appears to be that image you were shown on direct examination, that static Exhibit 19, right?
Yes.
Shows Officer Chauvin, shows Officer Mr. Floyd, it shows Officer Tubb.
Yes.
And it shows the perspective of the Miss Frazier's phone. Chief, are you familiar with the concept of camera perspective bias?
I am not, Counselor.
Now again,
I always start in the far end because a lot of freaking running, bro.
Exhibit 1019, that same perspective from Mr. King's body camera. And I'd offer 1019.
Because I got a haul ass after a minute.
1019.
Any objection?
Whoopsie.
1019 is received.
Which publisher?
I hope it's not that easy to set up dynamite.
Agree it appears to be the same time frame?
Yes.
Alright. Now lastly,
Choo
Chief, I'm going to show you
choo.
one last video. We could take this down there. I would offer exhibit 1020, which is a side by side.
That's why you do it that way, because this some bull shit.
And permission to publish.
Slow down, bitch. He didn't even put on his brakes.
Pardon? Oh.
No problem. That just ain't how I want to die. Come on. Let's go blow this thing up.
I just started it over. That's okay.
You want the honors? Sure.
Wait. I want to look. There we
You
go.
would agree, Chief, that from the perspective of Miss Frazier's camera,
He blew out a
appears that
fucking
Officer
bridge.
Chauvin's knee is on the neck of Mr.
All
Floyd.
the smoke he wants. Let's hope so.
Yes.
You really think that that'll draw attention away from us?
Nope.
Guess we'll see. To tell the truth, I ain't even sure I fully understand Dutch's plan with all of this. Like I said, John, when the time comes, you grow. What about loyalty to everything?
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
I've been loyal. Look what that cost. You know, all that ever mattered to me was loyalty. That's all I knew. That's all I ever believed in. Not anymore, John. Soon, you gotta go. Go.
Would you agree that from the perspective of
Think about it.
Officer King's body
Done a lot
camera,
of thinking.
it appears that Officer Chauvin's knee was more on Mr. Floyd's
Out
shoulder
here
blade?
risking our necks and for what he did. For an idea
Yes.
that don't work. How you think?
I have no further questions.
You need cash. You need to start building a life for yourself. Me?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Like stupid ass fools.
You know something?
Chief, let's start with what you just saw, and you testified that the particular moment in time that you were viewing Officer King, or former Officer King's body-worn camera, it appeared at that moment in time that the knee of the defendant was more towards the shoulder blade. Is that right?
That is correct.
Boy,
That was at a time where the ambulance had already arrived,
I'm seeing things a lot more
Yes.
clearly now.
very shortly before
I wish
they
things
loaded Mr. Floyd onto the gurney. Is that right?
That is correct.
And in your view of the body-worn camera footage, and everything you reviewed prior to testifying today, did you see the defendant's knee anywhere but the neck of Mr. Floyd up until that time?
That is correct.
And so the knee of the defendant was on Mr. Floyd's neck up until the time you just pointed out.
Yes, when I viewed that video portion, that is the first time that I'd seen the knee of the defendant on the shoulder blade area.
And that was right before the paramedic came.
That is correct.
Now,
Damn,
looking
Arthur.
at and talking about the neck restraint policy, if you would show Exhibit 17, please. Oh. Looking at Exhibit 17, was it your testimony that Exhibit 17 is not a trained MPD neck restraint?
Correct, that is my testimony.
And I'd like you to reflect on the exhibits that you were shown by defense counsel, exhibits 1008, 1019, and 1020, the 10-second clip. Okay. During that period of time, which is much later than the point in time we see here, did you see any indication that Mr. Floyd
Arthur, I love the way Sadie sounds, bro.
Resisting, as that term is defined in
I pull a hole in your head, bitch.
I did not observe Mr. Floyd to be actively resisting during that time.
I just might stream that.
Did you see, same question, same time period, any indication that Mr. Floyd was
what I'm
being
talking about?
actively aggressive during that 10-second
I
clip
am
that you were
just
shown?
talking about
No, I did not observe
Andromeda.
Mr. Floyd to be actively aggressive during that short video.
Could you even say that he was passively resisting at
To
that
be a
time when
writer.
you were shown those exhibits?
No. As a matter of fact, as I saw that video, I didn't even know if Mr. Floyd was alive at that time.
Man, I keep trampling over sacred ground every time.
On cross-examination about the use of the MRT or the hobble, right? And if I'm to understand your testimony, you indicated that a hobble is a strap that's used to connect a person, handcuffed person, their waist, the arms, and the legs to restrain them. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And what I thought I heard you saying in response to questioning by counsel was that you can do an MRT effectively, right, without using a hobble when you're doing the same thing but with your hands.
Yes, that is correct.
And did I understand your testimony to essentially be that that's what these officers were doing, was essentially using the maximal restraint technique but not using the hobble?
That is correct.
And pursuant to departmental policy, the hobble is the only authorized way to employ the maximal restraint technique. Is that right?
That is correct.
Are you aware that the use of the actual hobble requires a supervisor to report to the scene and do a force report?
Yes, the supervisor must arrive at the scene and do a report.
But that would be avoided if the hobble itself wasn't used, or?
No, you're still employing that sort of technique, again, with a prone individual handcuffed, and you're basically doing that maneuver. And because of the severity of risk to, and certainly that would have been to Mr. Floyd, you would have contacted a supervisor.
And aside from that, I mean, if you're using an MRT,
look at
you're
that.
supposed to adhere to departmental policy. Is that right?
That is correct.
And the Minneapolis departmental policy for the use of the MRT requires an officer to do what as soon as the MRT is applied?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Again, because of these severe nature of making sure that individual can breathe, you have to get that individual into a side recovery position.
Flash,
Sure
let me get you in a
airway is
picture.
Not obstructed, and so that's paramount.
So, and that's required by policy.
Wrong
The
way,
recovery
fool.
position is supposed to be instant. Is that right?
Immediate.
And you indicated that it has to do with breathing. You're familiar with the term positional asphyxia?
I am.
Is that one of the dangers of leaving somebody in a prone, handcuffed position for too long?
Yes, positional asphyxia. We
Selfie.
again, as I mentioned, we cannot transport people in that position if they're prone to handcuffed and there's pressure around their airways or on their back. The risk and potential for them and us killing them goes up substantially. So that side recovery position is very critically important.
I want to follow up on some of the questions about your own personal training and that of different officers in different roles within the Minneapolis Police Department. Different officers can attend other types of training, is that right?
Yes.
But everybody's required to do in-service training, is that true?
That is correct.
And regardless of where
Chill out,
somebody
bro.
trains, I mean, the rules are the rules, right?
Yes.
And the policy applies to all MPD officers.
Yes.
The question was posed regarding the critical decision-making model and the need
You're
to
a funny
keep
guy.
information.
I
That's
would.
true, correct?
Yes.
But I won't.
When we're looking at the proper and authorized
Keep
use
your little
of
nugget.
force under departmental policy. Is it fair to say that the amount of force
You're gonna need it.
an officer can use depends upon the conduct of the subject,
Maybe John will
the person
find him.
on whom the force is being used?
Yes, it's fair to say that.
So, for example, if you had me in, let's say,
Alright, let's go see
a
Hamish
dangerous
ass.
hold, would you be able to continue to keep me in a dangerous hold based on something somebody else is doing?
I'm sorry. If you could explain that, I'm sorry.
So, for example, if you found the need to place me in some sort of a hold that's dangerous,
Yes.
but something that you see, say the judge is starting to pick something up to throw at me, would that justify you using more force on me?
No.
Great tyrant. Mean as hell northern pike. Eats everything else that spawns around here, its own kind included. Well, is that our bait man, Jack or something? Hell no. He's a clever old bastard.
And in terms of de-escalating of the crowd, you indicated that there's some potential need to de-escalate a crowd, a group of people. Is that right?
Yes.
Because a group of people can experience something that they find shocking or upsetting, and that can, place them in some kind of an emotional state. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you may need to turn your attention to and de-escalate the crowd.
Yes.
Would one way, if we could show Exhibit 17, would one way to de-escalate the crowd who's experiencing something shocking to stop doing the thing that's shocking them?
Absolutely.
I have nothing further.
Any recross?
Thank you. Very briefly, just one question. There are certain circumstances where an officer has to kind of freeze the situation, evaluate, hold the person until he or she can decide what's the safest way to move forward. Agreed?
Agreed.
Sometimes you just have to kind of hold the person, correct?
Yes.
And that's something that happens fairly frequently. Agreed?
Yes.
And so, one other question with respect to the policy regarding the maximal restraint technique and putting a person in the recovery position or the side recovery position. You said it was immediate. Agreed?
As soon as you're able to do so, yes.
And that's actually what the policy says, is as soon as you're able to do so, right?
Yes.
And there are certain circumstances under which you may be using force where the force has to be dealt with before you can turn your attention to rendering medical aid, right?
And Counselor, just so that, are we still talking about someone in the recovery position or the hospital?
Just generally.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. There are certain circumstances where a use of force needs to be continued for some reason to deal with something else before you can deal or render medical aid. Let me give you an example. We're in a gun battle, right? You and I are shooting at each other. I'm the cop, you're the bad guy, and you hit my partner. I'm going to continue to use my force against you before I can go render medical aid.
Counselor, in that hypothetical, yes.
Thank you.
Briefly.
Sometimes it's necessary to freeze a scene and to hold an individual, correct?
Yes.
But you have to do so safely. You have to hold the person safely. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Your Honor, thank you so much.
Next witness. All right.
We have been watching the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, along with some of our friends and reporters, regular and known to all of you. Joyce Vance is with us. Carmen Best joins us. And I want to add to our conversation MSNBC political analyst and former prosecutor, the former Senator Claire McCaskill. Claire, a former prosecutor texted this to me. The jury already understands that Mr. Floyd was prone, cuffed behind his back, and lost consciousness. They also now understand, thanks to the chief, that Chauvin violated MPD policy. Seems like a good day for the prosecution.
Yeah, and the defense attorney does what defense attorneys do, which is trying to make something out of nothing. You know, the bottom line is this man was handcuffed and had 3 police officers on top of him. Handcuffed with 3 police officers on top of him, plus another officer standing by monitoring the crowd. There is nothing in that situation that presented a threat. And 9 minutes is an eternity. As I said the other day, honestly, all I think the prosecutor needs to do is stand up in front of the jury and stand there quietly for 9 minutes, because that's an eternity. And that's the problem these defense lawyers have. And frankly, I don't think that defense lawyer, Joyce, I think will agree with me, having been in a courtroom like that, having been in cross-examinations like that, you know, the prosecutor, the entire time the defense lawyer was crossing the chief of police, the prosecutor was probably saying, keep going, because you're not making any progress. All you're doing is the jury is thinking to themselves, well, wait a minute. What you're saying isn't true. There was no danger from the crowd. There was no danger from this man. So sometimes, in an effort to make a point, you make the opposite point.
Well, and I don't know, Joyce, if this applies in courtrooms, but certainly in politics when you're in a hole, stop digging. And it seemed like every time the defense attorney stood up to try to, it seems that their strategy is to try to create in a juror's mind a belief system that suggests that in the heat of the moment you can do anything. But this was almost a quarter of an hour. There was no heat of the moment anything that's being scrutinized here. I mean, if it were heat of the moment, maybe you're back in the car. But what is so clear from all of this eyewitness footage and from all of the testimony of people that had nothing else in common other than they happened on this spot and watched Derek Chauvin take the life out of George Floyd.
There we go.
They all
Getting
came to the same
closer.
assessment about what
I'll
happened
try to
that
get
day.
to the front of that.
What is sort of the history of defense attorneys like this one having success with a strategy like what he's trying to deploy?
One measure of how effective a cross-examination is how much work the prosecutors have to do with the witness on redirect. And so you'll notice, confirming Claire's assessment of the situation, prosecutors had very little redirect to do, because most of what Mr. Nelson spent his time doing was asking hypothetical questions about situations that was not the situation that was presented with George Floyd. You know, isn't it technically possible that X could happen? Well, sure, but that's not what happened on the day that we're looking at. So it was a very ineffective cross-examination.
Fish, bro.
Keep thinking of this extraordinary position the chief is in. And for the defense attorney to say, hypothetically, if it were a shootout, I mean, the point is it wasn't. And there were 4 guns drawn on George Floyd as he was unarmed in a car. I mean, even his hypotheticals didn't seem to advance whatever his strategy is.
Exactly, and I'm sure the chief in the back of his mind was thinking what everyone here is saying. What does that have to do with anything. You know, why am I even being asked these questions? So kudos to him for remaining calm and composed and just answering the question, as ridiculous as some of them did seem at the time. You know, a shootout and freezing the scene. What does that have to do with Derek Chauvin placing his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes? And so looking out, he mentioned looking out at the crowd, the danger of the crowd. There were 4 cops there, and the crowd was really trying to get them to help Mr. Floyd. So it seemed rather ridiculous. I'm sure the chief was thinking the same thing, although he remained professional as he would and answered the questions accordingly.
And Claire, the crowd we now know, because of the first week of the case the prosecution has put on, included a 9-year-old, another minor is a former EMT, not people who, police officers who roam the streets and know their beats would naturally be fearful of, and they were all wielding cell phones. I want to read you some of the New York Times live blog from what we've been talking about. This is from the Times reporter John Elliott in Minneapolis. Case in point, Nelson asked the chief if his problem with Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck was the amount of time he held it there, over 9 minutes. What is the severity of the crime?
Hey, Bew.
Are you reevaluating and assessing the individual's medical condition? Probably not what the defense lawyer wanted to hear. So just to this point, that the defense attorney, by taking so much time cross-examining this very credible witness, may have hurt his case.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it does hurt his case. I think that when you are in a situation, when you are defending a case like this, sometimes less is more. You know, he only, I think, has a shot at somehow getting the jury to not find the most serious crime. Or maybe he's just trying to find one juror that's going to be irrational. But the bottom line is, I think this police chief, once you took your measure of this witness, how composed, how informed, how articulate he was, once you took the measure of that witness, then a smart defense attorney does less and not more. And this police chief was a formidable witness to this officer who put his knee on the neck and took the life out of George Floyd that day. And it is one the jury won't forget. And frankly, the more time this witness spent on the stand, the more unforgettable he became.
I think that's right. We'll be talking about him a lot in the days and weeks to come. I'm grateful to all of you. Our thanks to Joyce Vance, Carmen Bess, and Claire McCaskill. Everyone will continue to listen to the trial. We're going to continue to monitor it for other developments. But in the meantime, we're going to get to other headlines when the next hour of Deadline White House starts after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Imagine being pregnant and finding out you have cancer. My name is Robin, and that was my reality. But I trusted my team of cancer specialists at Northwestern Medicine. My nurses, my orthopedic surgeon, and my high-risk obstetrician. They collaborated to come up with the safest chemotherapy plan, so I didn't have to choose between my life and my babies.
Anchored by the #1 hospital in Illinois for 9 straight years, Robin's unique team at Northwestern Medicine worked together to remove her cancer the same morning they delivered her baby girl, Sophia.
I worried one of us wouldn't make it, but thanks to my incredible team, here we are, thriving.
Northwestern Medicine. What makes us better makes you better.
started investing when I was quite young, about 10 years old.
I have not started investing yet.
Indeed, yes, I have invested.
It's something that I'm brand new to. I find it difficult because I don't have the knowledge, you know. I think an app would help if I had more education, knowledge, and information.
I invest to set up for my future.
If there's any app that would make my life much easier, please send it my way.
Make my life easier, at least. That would be amazing.
Truth be told, I never liked her anyway. And she betrayed us.
Every day is filled with a million reasons to give. Every moment is not.
Good point.
Imagine being pregnant and finding out you have cancer. My name is Robin, and that was my reality. But I trusted my team of cancer specialists at Northwestern Medicine. My nurses, my orthopedic surgeon, and my high-risk obstetrician. They collaborated to come up with the safest chemotherapy plan, so I didn't have to choose between my life and my babies.
Anchored by the #1 hospital in Illinois for 9 straight years, Robin's unique team at Northwestern Medicine worked together to remove her cancer the same morning they delivered her baby girl, Sophia.
I worried one of us wouldn't make it, but thanks to my incredible team, here we are, thriving.
Northwestern Medicine. What makes us better makes you better.
This is the sound of greatness. No shortcuts, no magic stars. Being great means being pretty bad for a while. And soon, you'll be something else. Speaking a new language. Rosetta Stone. How language is learned.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in the East. We will continue to monitor developments in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin. But we start this hour with a crush of new reporting on the steep price of disinformation. 2 blockbuster pieces of reporting, both from the New York Times, add to our understanding of the carnage from the GOP's big lie. One might actually test the limits of our capacity for sympathy, but it also adds motive for Donald Trump's deadly lie about election fraud. It's one that's reverberating around the country in the form of faux outrage from Georgia Republicans about boycotts. Trump donors were scammed for thousands of dollars, tricked into making unwitting recurring donations to Donald Trump's ailing campaign. It's the first time we're learning that the big lie may have also been motivated by campaign debt from that stunning New York Times account. Quote, facing a cash crunch and getting badly outspent by the Democrats, the campaign had begun last September to set up recurring donations by default for online donors for every week until the election. Contributors had to wade through a fine print disclaimer and manually uncheck a box to opt out. The tactic ensnared scores of unsuspecting loyalists, retirees, military veterans, nurses, and even experienced political operatives. Soon, banks and credit card companies were inundated with complaints from the president's own supporters about donations they had not intended to make, sometimes for thousands of dollars. The Times also details a war against GOP disinformation from within, with a report on former Congressman Denver Riggleman of Virginia. Mr. Riggleman is a living example of the political price of falling out of lockstep with the hard right they write. He lost a GOP primary race last June after he officiated at the wedding of a gay couple. And once he started calling out QAnon, whose followers believe that a satanic network of child molesters runs the Democratic Party, he received death threats and was attacked as a traitor, including by members of his own family. Here he is.
Let me get my rifle.
Floor, one of only 2 Republicans who spoke out in favor of a resolution denouncing QAnon. Watch.
Will we stand up and condemn a dangerous, dehumanizing, and convoluted conspiracy theory that the FBI is assessed with high confidence is very likely to motivate some domestic extremist? I agree with my friend and colleague Tom Malinowski that we should not be playing with fire. I've been in the intelligence business. I know the power of information operations and false information.
The And speaking of playing with fire, GOP disinformation, either augmented by or inspired by Russian disinformation on COVID and COVID vaccines, is also exacting a toll on this country at a crucial juncture. Here's just one example of Fox News' primetime anchors.
Trump gave him and Dr. Scarf an outsized public platform, helped burnish their reputation. And now, well, they're just kind of stabbing in the back by blaming former President Trump for their own failures. And the experts' disinformation campaign is ongoing about COVID, even after vaccines. The variants are coming, the mutations, gloom and doom.
Where to begin? Of course, none of that is true. Virus mutations tragically are real. They're a common phenomenon, and experts have warned about the COVID-19 variants because they've been found all over the world. They've been found to have higher transmission rates, and some are more likely to lead to severe illness or death. The GOP addiction to lies, 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 and the tolls they take on this country is where we start this hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Tim Miller, of course, is here, writer-at-large for The Bulwark, and former RNC spokesman. Also joining us, Jake Sherman, founder of Punchbowl News and an MSNBC political contributor, and Carol Leonnig is here, Washington Post national reporter and MSNBC contributor. You know, Carol, we're juggling, obviously, live coverage of the trial, and there was so much great reporting from the weekend, and what it all has in common is the Republican Party as a either hostage of or hostage taker of lies. I mean, all of these threats to the country, whether it's domestic violent extremism, whether it's this scam, this fundraising scam, that if you were a company, I'm sure you'd be under criminal investigation on behalf of his campaign, and then the ongoing lies about COVID, they all have as their central disseminator Republicans.
You know, I'm really glad you focused on some of this great work by our New York Times competitors and colleagues, and I think Shane's piece in particular is so striking because it goes to the heart of, are you defrauding your own people? Are you tricking them into giving you money based on some fine print they can't see? It does remind me, Nicole, just a tiny bit of something Steve Bannon was criminally charged with as part of a conspiracy group to try to get Trump donors and supporters to give him and his friends money for a nonprofit that wasn't a nonprofit that was supposed to rebuild a portion of the wall. You know, everything sounds good, and it's a great rallying cry for those folks who are really concerned about immigrants storming the border and
he's mine
coming into your towns. But
we know, Sadie,
it was just a way to skeeve off some money, and it's fascinating what's happening with this particular fundraising scheme. On the issue of disinformation, I'll just say really quickly that it's striking to me that Republicans are both tethered to the president's popularity and also adding gas to it by continuing to support QAnon theory. You know, it's a sort of a vicious circle.
It's a vicious circle, it's a deadly circle, and Tim, you know, you can't put half the country on the couch, but it's self-destructive, and I want to focus in where Carol started. I mean, this reporting about what Trump did to his own supporters adds motive to the lie that led to the deadly insurrection, and if anyone's looking at all that conduct, it certainly feels like another layer to scrutinize, that he was screwing his own most loyal supporters. Once you're a donor, you're hooked, right? There's the level of people that will watch Fox News because they are in your camp, and then there's the level of people who vote for you every 4 years. But then it's next level. It's like the winners club, the people who come to your events and give money to your campaign. Those are like sort of the most important political supporters that you have. And to his most valuable supporters, he screwed.
See, that's why I like Sadie. She knows just sit there and wait.
Which again,
while I do my looting.
And that's hidden. There are severe fines and punishments for that.
Yeah, Nicole, look, I think there are two things at play here. One, we don't need to spend that much time on, which is that Donald Trump is a scam artist. He's been a scam artist going back to Trump University and to all of the other scams that he scammed people over when he was in the private sector, all the way to the Precious TV show as a scam, and his first campaign was a scam. And frankly, if he's been successful at anything, he's probably the most successful scam artist in history. But I think that the relevant thing here to add to this picture, which you mentioned with regards to January 6th, is these emails And the messages that he's been sending out, I think over time we just get used to this sort of thing, right? And people, you stop writing news stories about it. And Carol can't write a news story every day that Donald Trump's campaign sends out an email saying that the election has been stolen.
I'm good, loot out her.
Some of the texts and emails that I was getting from them between November and January 6th, and they are not only lies, but they are insane, and they are part of what got people so riled up to the point where they were willing to storm the Capitol carrying a Trump flag and spear a police officer with it. And the ACU, run by Matt Schlapp, the NRSC, the RNC, Donald Trump's campaign, were all sending out emails about how the election was being stolen from them, about how it was a fraud, and that's how you get people hooked on these recurring emails. So these things do all tie very much together, and it should not be seen just through the lens of, oh, this was a financial scam, which it was, but it's also part of the broader scam that the whole Trump apparatus and the party's apparatus was perpetrating on his own supporters, but on all of us, from November all the way through the insurrection, and frankly still to today.
And, hell hath no fury, Jake Sherman, like a Republican on Republican sort of family feud. Tim and I can attest to that. But the other piece of reporting we talked about was about one Republican's lonely fight against the flood of disinformation. Let me read you some of Jeremy Peters' great reporting on Mr. Riggleman. The undoing of Mr. Riggleman and now his unlikely crusade is revealing about a dimension of conservative politics today. The fight against radicalism within the GOP is a deeply lonely one, waged mostly by Republicans like him who are no longer in office.
Damn, Sadie, you just love getting bloody.
Who have decided that they are willing to speak up, even if it means that they too could be headed for an early retirement.
God, Sadie, you bathed in his blood.
You don't understand. Yeah. This is getting worse, not better, Mr. Riggleman.
He raped you, didn't he?
Sitting on a stool at his family bar one recent afternoon. People are angry, and they're angry.
And he killed your Jakey too, huh?
This feels like something that you've been trying to, I think, bring to us and report to us in your coverage of how 12 Republicans could vote against giving medals for the Capitol police officers, some of whom paid with their lives. And again on Friday, this is reporting that you've tried to articulate, and I thought of you when I read this, just how tense it is, how impossible it is for the two parties, especially the near 150 Republicans who voted against certifying the election result after the insurrection. This reporting helps people understand how viciously the Republicans are fighting for the right to lie.
Well, you can count on one hand at this point, Nicole, Republicans who are not in Donald Trump's corner, or better yet, are not of his cloth, right? I mean, there's literally just Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. That's all that's really left of the Republican Party that people like you and Tim used to. That's the party you used to be a part of, right? I mean, there's nobody else left, and I get this question all the time. I mean, people say, when are they going to give up on Donald Trump? When are they going to cut ties? When are they going to throw him under the bus? And the unfortunate for a lot of Republicans who want to get back to that party, the unfortunate reality, Donald Trump still has 70-80% approval ratings in Republican districts across the country. Riggleman's loss was a little bit more complicated than that. He was in a convoluted primary system. I think it was a convention, which made it even more bizarre. And I think he made the argument at the time that if it was a different format, he would have possibly been able to keep his seat in Congress. But, yeah, it's extraordinarily lonely. And, people make the argument that they follow in Donald Trump's footsteps because they need to. It's where their voters are. And my argument to a lot of Republicans has traditionally been, you don't know where your voters would be if you took another course of action, right? I mean, I've said that to people in the leadership before. They say, well, we have to vote to invalidate the election because that's where Donald Trump is and our voters are with Donald Trump. And my argument is, well, you don't know where your voters would be. It's a false construct because you're not taking, and I'm not suggesting they should take this position. I'm just presenting another construct here, which is if you took the position that you say you believe is right, then maybe your voters would be like, maybe we shouldn't vote to invalidate an election and cause a massive war at the Capitol. So, that's the vibe up here as it is every day. And you know what the interesting thing is, Nicole, and you got me thinking about this, I'll just add one more point. I mean, history tells us, and I know I get a lot of tweets. I get a lot of tweets whenever I say this, so save your tweets and save your emails, because this is true. History tells us Republicans are probably going to take back the House of Representatives. That's just because the president's the party out of power typically wins 26 seats on average in the first midterm of an incumbent president's election term. So what does that Republican Party look like, right? I mean, if Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, I mean, what does that look like for the Republican Party and for governing? Because then it's not just a video game, so to speak, right? It's governing, it's reality, it's keeping the country on track. And Kevin McCarthy is very close to Donald Trump and remains very close to Donald Trump. So those are some of the things that are running through my mind in this strain of what is the future of this party that both of you guys worked for so many years in, and I've been covering for the last, decade or more.
Carol, I'll raise Jake Sherman's midterm history of my own. One time that history was defied was in 2002, 2 years after the attacks of 9/11, when the question was security. And I think that Republicans are aligning themselves with an ideology that is a domestic terror threat. The ideology that they're aligning themselves with is, in the words of an alert, a bulletin that came out at the beginning of this year, grounds for keeping our eyes out, and if you see something, say something, for domestic violent extremism, rooting in discontent over COVID restrictions and discontent over the big lie about the election. That's where they're associating themselves. If voters think that the Republican ideology is a domestic terror threat, history could defy it, that normal pattern that Jake is talking about.
Well, Nicole, I think it's really smart for you and Jake to bring this up, in part because the real truth about voters is their memory is incredibly short, and 9/11 almost faded from people's memories, not the actual event, of course, but in terms of their commitment to national security and to safety after about 4 years. And I think in reverse logic, if I may, if there is an event, God forbid, if there is another event akin to the Capitol siege, which sickened so many Republicans and Democrats and frightened so many Americans, if there is another event like that, I do think that it will change the calculus for the country about where we land in the midterms. I'm not a political scientist, but I am a follower.
You want to be in my photo?
And they do react to two things: their pocketbook and their sense of
that's why I don't be doing that shit. I don't got time for all that bullshit.
The country's house was not safe. Let's see what happens between now and then.
Well, and Tim Miller, I think this comes back to where this is heading, and I
haven't taken this
accept as fact the reporting on where the Republicans stand, and they're being tethered to Donald Trump. But I don't think that's where the heat is, or the attention is. I think the heat is around the current QAnon member, that none of them had the
balls,
stomach to hold accountable for subscribing to just a bat bleep crazy ideology. And I think the heat as you move forward will be around Republicans that are standing by Matt Gaetz, who may or may not have sex trafficked with a minor. I mean, I think that when you rip Trump off the front page, what's underneath on the right is dirtier, grosser, more corrupt, and less aligned with any recognizable policies that are in the national interest.
Oh boy, Nicole, we usually agree. I don't know if you can get dirtier, grosser, and more corrupt than Donald Trump, but I take your point.
Well, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene?
That's all in the same boat for me. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. But look at the Virginia. I wrote about the Virginia governor's race, and I'm sure Jake is covering this as well. You've got this Republican primary going on where there is this woman, Amanda Chase, who's running as Trump in heels, right? And then you have these supposedly kind of mainstream business guys who are running against her. And the mainstream business guys ran on the big line. And they're both running, they both leaked to Fox News their election integrity plan about how we got to fix the election integrity in Virginia, where Joe Biden won by 10 points. I mean, there's no even reasonable, plausible way to state that you have to be concerned about the fraudulent in the election in Virginia. So I do think that the big lie continues to be
fuck
next year. I don't know, but I also
jeez, why I keep doing that shit.
I see this as a game. And Kevin McCarthy saw it as a game when he voted to overturn the election. These Virginia guys running, Pete Snyder and Ron Young,
hate that shit.
This is a game.
Now I got fast travels fast. Twice, I mean.
And I think that is where they're wrong. And I think what we saw in 1-6 is this is not a game. This is all deadly serious. And the fact that Kevin McCarthy thinks that he can just continue to play around with this BS until he actually wins next fall, as Jake points out, I just think that they're in for a rude awakening. And if they didn't have it already on January 6th like they should have.
Carol, let me just come back to you really quickly. Are there any Republicans that I'm missing who put Homeland Security and national security ahead of party loyalty, other than the ones that have been named here? And I'll throw Mitt Romney into the mix, too.
Nope.
You know, I have to say I can't count them in terms of who's speaking publicly. I can tell you there are many more that are speaking privately of grave concern about the QAnoners. There have been members who've said to me that they're afraid of being in their own districts and saying out loud what they think. Not because of being reelected, mind you, which I thought was the primary concern, but about their own safety. And, you know, if you're not tethered more dangerous, I don't know what it is, but it is fascinating. I have to give Donald Trump credit for this. You know, he tapped into a division in our country. He widened it. He milked it. He rode to success in many ways, and he is able to get 6 or 7 out of 10 Republicans believing something that's palpably
Relax.
false.
It's a baby.
Demonstrably false. So at the same time, he's gotten a group of Republicans who feel strongly that Russia is a danger, who feel that domestic extremism is a danger, to be silent about it. And
now let's try this properly.
I mean, to me, that is one of the most stunning, it's not evolution of the Republican Party, but its destruction is in part due to what you just articulated. Carol Lennick, thank you so much for starting us off this hour. Tim and Jake are sticking around. When we come back, the decision to move the MLB All-Star Game out of Atlanta continues to reverberate across sports and politics today. The finger pointing is just beginning, but who's responsible for any harm it could do to Georgia's economy? The Democrats say the issue is even bigger than that. Plus, with the pandemic-stricken country on a knife's edge, balancing the promise of the vaccines with the threat of a potential fourth wave, Republicans seem once again intent on going after Anthony Fauci. Yep, all that when Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Your heart is failing. 4 words no one ever wants to hear. I'm Mike, and this is my team at Northwestern Medicine. My nurses, my cardiologist, my cardiac surgeon, and my pulmonologist. Yes, heart and lungs, because blood clots in my lungs were causing my heart to fail.
Oh, I need to wait till dark.
Number 1 hospital in Illinois for 9 straight years, only Northwestern Medicine had the solution to save Mike. A breakthrough treatment that reached the remote clots deep in the lungs that surgery couldn't. Tiny balloons are used to gently open the delicate vessels, restoring blood flow. Not long ago, there was no solution, but Northwestern Memorial Hospital was the first hospital in Illinois to perform this life-saving procedure.
My team saved my lungs.
I am in the wilderness. The whole place is a wilderness.
Northwestern Medicine. What makes us better makes you better.
Are you suffering from knee pain? Do you want an effective, long-lasting treatment covered by Medicare and private insurance? The Joint Relief Institute helped thousands eliminate arthritis knee pain by replacing the cushioning inside the joint with advanced digital imaging.
It enabled me to go 5 years without surgery.
Walk out the same day and avoid the hospitals and knee replacement.
I know. Oh shit, gators. Why must you do that to me? Oy, oy, oy. They're not even. They're chilling.
Shine a light on the world of money with Greenlight, a debit card for kids.
Ooh.
They'll learn to earn, save,
shut up,
and invest. Join more than 2 million parents and kids at greenlightcard.com.
Up to $1 million. That's how much University of Phoenix is committing to create 400 scholarships this month alone. If you're committed to earning your degree, we're committed to making it accessible. Because we believe everybody deserves a chance. And sometimes, one chance is all it takes to change everything. See what scholarship opportunities you may qualify for at phoenix.edu.
Mack Weldon is reinventing men's basics, and it all starts with more comfortable underwear. That means underwear made with soft, breathable, moisture-wicking fabrics, targeted cool zones, waistbands that won't roll over, and legs that won't ride up. We're confident our underwear is more comfortable than what you've got on right now. So confident, in fact, that we came up with this guarantee. If you don't love your first pair, it's on us. Try a pair at MackWeldon.com.
Hunger is here, and I needed it because my fridge is super empty. I'm going to open the box.
Let's find your road, scaredy cat.
Hungry road came through. And my refrigerator is packed.
In the middle of a pandemic, Major League Baseball put the wishes of Stacey Abrams and Joe Biden ahead of the economic well-being of hard-working Georgians who are counting on the All-Star game for a paycheck.
Wow, wow.
Georgians and all Americans should know what this decision means. It means cancel culture and partisan activists are coming for your business.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp there slamming Major League Baseball of the weekend after its decision to pull the 2021 All-Star game from Atlanta due to the state's new restrictive voting law. Democratic Georgia Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock also voiced his disappointment with the move, believing it could hurt Georgia businesses, but maintaining that the fault lies with right-wing politicians, writing, quote, "It wasn't the people or workers of Georgia who crafted SB 202. It was politicians seeking to retain power at the expenses of Georgians' voices. And today's decision by the MLB is the unfortunate consequence of these politicians' actions."
Stop moving,
our conversation, former RNC chairman and MSNBC political analyst Michael Steele. Tim and Jake are still here. Michael Steele, boycotts are painful. Boycotts are unpopular. Boycotts are polarizing. Boycotts are where this was. They had passed a law that might have altered the outcome of the last presidential election. And this is where MLB found themselves. Not at perfect. Perfect was no longer on the table. But it was not baseball's fault that people will go without paychecks because the game has moved. It's Kemp's fault.
Yeah, it's where the politics and the business and kind of merge at this point where you say, what do we do? I mean,
make me miss my appointment.
What corporations in Georgia otherwise do? Here's the rub: if those corporations had decided on their own to act as corporate citizens ahead of or while this debate was ongoing, they'd be in a very different position at this point, because they could have made it known very quietly to the Warnocks and the Kemps and the Stacey Abrams and everyone else involved in this narrative what their stated position would be publicly. So if you pursue this effort, understand that we will be against it, and that we think that this is nothing more than a reaction to an election that you lost, as opposed to actually finding, because no one has stated with any clarity and facts that there were these violations. So what is the reasoning and the rationale for this legislative action after getting your political clocks clean? But they didn't do that. So they were forced into this position by activists who then said to them, you have no other choice but to boycott. Because you forfeited the leadership role on the front end, which should be an ongoing lesson for businesses in the future, that, yeah, you pay to play. You write those checks during campaign seasons to these candidates who then on the back end think that that's as far as it will go. And they commit themselves to these actions, as we all know very well. Tim and Nicole haven't been in this political space for a long time, that this plays out this way. And that these politicians are going to get you on the back end because they figure, well, what else are you going to do? Well, now there is something else they can do, and that's what's being played out in Georgia.
You're being elegant about it. I want to be a little more blunt. I mean, Jake Sherman, every company,
Lemire.
exactly what was in the laws, and it's a crock of you know what.
Film that girl, monsieur.
I'm sure we can. It's all very ethical. You see, I've been trying to open a major place of culture to elevate people's souls.
Mais la bouche.
And what do museums need?
When we worked on campus.
Art.
They didn't want the bill because companies hire people that work in the building behind you aggressively. They recruit them. It's their job to tell them what's in laws, working their way through state legislatures and through the Capitol. What happened was that people started talking about voter suppression laws. And to me, when the reporting shifted to really focus, and it was in Friday's New York Times fact check about the law, to a law that would take power away from the very people that we all had white knuckles covering in the days after the November election and the inauguration, the state sort of election officials who could not be corrupted by Donald Trump. That's the reason we ultimately had a transfer of power. We can't call it peaceful, but it's the reason we ultimately transferred from Donald Trump, who lost, to Joe Biden, who won. The Georgia law seeks to disempower them and give power to the Republican, Trumpy state legislature. So the notion that people didn't know what was in it is also one of the sort of misnomers out there for anyone covering these laws, making their way through, I think, 47 states, 108 of them.
And Nicole, you hit on the point really early here, which is these companies have armies of lobbyists, and I'm just speaking of companies generally, not only here in the Capitol, but in every state house across the country. Corporations are, unless it's going to impact their immediate bottom line, taxes, tariffs, things of that nature, they're risk averse, and they don't want to get involved in anything that doesn't impact them immediately or foreseeably impact them immediately. And I found it really interesting today. Mitch McConnell was in Lexington at the University of Kentucky, and he said that CEOs should not be involved in politics and should stay out of politics. I don't remember him saying that when he was trying to pass his tax bill in 2018, I think end of 2017, and there's nothing, by the way, there's nothing inherently wrong with CEOs being involved in politics. There's actually organizations of CEOs that are involved in politics for the express purpose of being involved in politics. Many of those CEOs are big donors to Mitch McConnell. And to Republicans, frankly. So the idea that corporations should not have a voice in the political system doesn't line up with McConnell's history, of course, and doesn't line up with where Republicans have been for decades, if not centuries. And the three of you have been in Republican politics for a long time, and I think you'd all agree with that Mitch McConnell had never, or no Republican leader, and Michael Steele, when you were the chairman of the RNC, I can't imagine if you said CEOs should stay out of politics, you'd be a poor man at the RNC, right?
Oh my God. Republicans think corporations are people, remember? I mean, that's where we are. Tim, I want to pull you into this, and I want to come back to baseball. I spoke to an owner today who said, this had to go this way. And another person very familiar with baseball said that they're sort of stuck in the middle. They're not, in a good way, not the NFL, who still hasn't found a team for Colin Kaepernick, but they're not the NBA, which is very comfortable with activism and player-driven activism. But that baseball had to do what they did by moving the game. But an owner said to me, it's a slippery slope. Do you think they'll get wobbly action coming from Republicans and all the taunting tweets about cancel culture and whatnot?
Well, I don't know if they'll get wobbly about the All-Star game. I mean, at this point, they're pretty pregnant with that decision. I do think that they're going to be nervous about how to appeal to Republican consumers, though, and baseball has a Republican audience, not overwhelmingly, but more than, say, the NBA does. You look at how the NFL got wobbly after, the Colin Kaepernick stuff when Trump started attacking them. I went to an NFL game here in Oakland, and, we had like 9 salutes to the military over the course of 4 quarters, which wasn't exactly very subtle. So they were trying to sort of reappeal to the Republican base. But here's the thing, by the way, that's what companies do. Companies have to look out for their own employees and for their customers. They've got to respect the rights of everyone that's an American, respect the rights of every consumer. But besides that, they want to do what's right that will make people find their brand appealing. And this is what Republicans have been for my whole life. Like, I was just cracking up listening to Jake, hearing Mitch McConnell talk like Bernie Sanders. that, we're going to have to target and go after these woke corporations if they don't do what they want? These corporations have been doing what Mitch McConnell wants the whole time I was in Washington. They're for tax cuts, they're for cutting regulations. Like I said, they've been pro-military. They maybe disagreed with the Republicans on gay rights. That was the right decision. But overall, these corporations have been largely aligned with Republicans. And now on one thing, protecting people's right to vote, they side against them. And now the Republicans are like, we got to take away your tax cuts and target you? What is happening?
But that's
good. Nicole, can I just add one? Yeah, sorry.
Please, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, isn't this the free market that we've been hearing about for a long time, right? A company believes that this policy is not in line with its beliefs and believes that at the end of the day, as Tim said, they could lose consumers of their product. So they've suggested that this is not the place to... And by the way, what is it even... let's take the most lowest common denominator. Let's just assume that the bill, it doesn't say what everyone says it does, but the perception of it is so bad at this point, regardless of the fact. I'm not even suggesting the fact is wrong, but the perception, the reporting, how it's being portrayed is so bad that these companies are now saying we can have nothing to do with this and it's not right. So this is like the free market that we've heard about for a long time in the Republican Party.
Coups aren't good for business.
The opposite does happen to be true, Michael Steele. The law, it took people a long time.
We came to an
understanding. I actually think the coverage of these laws got better over time, and what you're seeing now is the most in-depth reporting on what's in the laws. And undeniably, the Georgia law makes it a whole lot more difficult for young people, for transient people, and for people in more populated places. Typically in this country, that means African American and minority communities to vote.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think a lot of it also, as further analysis is done on these laws, you're seeing and there's comparison now that's being done to other states like New York and elsewhere, where this law is not as strong or as draconian as you may think in some of these other regards. Like the length of time for early voting is longer under current of the new Georgia law than it is in New York. Right. So you have this, but I think Jake makes the fundamental point, which is the important one. And as the three of us know, not excluding Jake from this, because he covers it, so he gets to tell people that perception is reality in politics. And the perception, to Jake's point, is that the law came out of the gate on the wrong foot. And the impact it would have on black communities is the thing that's driving this. But keep in mind, to the point made earlier by Tim, that the reality still exists for these companies that while, yes, initially everyone was against Black Lives Matter, eventually the culture, the companies, and the country moved to the right spot on this. And so this is that moment where you're talking about a social engagement on one front, you're now talking about voting on the other, that while the corporations may think, oh, this is a slippery slope and what does it mean, the country is eventually going to move to the right spot where opening up voter rolls and voting opportunity is going to be greater than shutting it down. So you want to be on the right side of that history.
I totally agree. And just a really quick last point. I also think that we're talking about a pie that's this big because we're talking about voter restriction laws and whether companies stay quiet, oppose them, or I guess I haven't seen an instance yet of supporting them. The pie should be this big, and it should be voter suppression laws by Republicans peddling the lie, and voter access laws on the other side, backed by everybody else. Democrats,
You're
Republicans,
still looking for
see
Gavin,
the
poor
truth
guy.
and refute the lie, and any corporation that wants to serve the interests of their communities. We have to have this conversation again with all of you. Please come back. Michael Steele, Jake Sherman, thank you. Tim Miller is sticking around. Up next for us, in this make or break moment in our country's fight against coronavirus, why Dr. Anthony Fauci has been forced to take on the GOP.
But you can't find him anywhere. Kevin! I think Gavin's dead, bro. Gav, buddy.
When you earn a degree from the University of Phoenix, we support you with career coaching, including resume building.
Like the biggest mysteries of Rockstar. Where the fuck is Gavin?
For your entire career. So if you commit to earning a
You need a
degree with
brushing?
us, We commit to standing by you until the day you retire. That's career services for life. Find out more about our commitment at phoenix.edu.
Hungry Root is here, and I needed it because my fridge is super empty. I'm gonna open the box. That's the exciting part. Hungry Root came through, and my refrigerator is packed.
Yep, it's the boat dude. I ain't do that shit.
So, Aiden got this new debit card from Greenlight. It's a kid's debit card so they can start to learn how to use money, how to spend money, and also how to save money. Your kids can download the app, you can download the app. I think you're really going to like this.
Is reinventing men's
Well, I'll
faces.
see you later tonight, Mr. Gunsmith.
That means underwear made with soft, breathable, moisture-wicking fabrics.
Can I do that now? Higher and higher.
When you earn a degree with the University of Phoenix, we support you with career coaching, including resume building, interview prep, personal branding, and more for your entire career. So if you commit to earning a degree with us, we commit to standing by you until the day you retire. That's career services for life. Find out more about our commitment at phoenix.edu.
I've become sort of, for some reason or other, a symbol to them of what they don't like about anything that has to do with things that are contrary to them, anything outside of their own realm. I'm not trying to scare anybody. What we're saying is that we make recommendations based on scientific evidence and data. I don't think anyone would consider me a scaremonger. I've never been that way at all.
That was Dr. Anthony Fauci on Neil Cavuto's program on Fox last Friday, and good for Neil Cavuto for hosting him. Fauci there defending himself after several attacks from prominent Republicans who've been working to undercut the country's top infectious disease expert during one of the most precarious stretches in the country's fight against COVID. Fauci coming under particular fire from one Senator Lindsey Graham, who in a series of weird tweets that the coronavirus was spreading rampantly at
what the hell are you talking about?
Border, and pleaded with Fauci to address what he called the country's, quote, biggest super spreader event. And while Fauci acknowledged that the border situation was indeed very dire, he made clear he had nothing to do with the border and called the whole interaction, quote, bizarre. With cases rising around the country, this latest attempt by the right to politicize science and our COVID response puts our recovery in jeopardy. At the very moment, experts are warning that the country could be on the brink of a fourth surge if we don't do all of the right things. Joining our conversation, Lori Garrett, health policy analyst, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, Foreign Policy magazine columnist, one of our favorite people to turn to. First on this moment, it's almost as confusing as it's ever been. If you pull down all the vaccine stories, the news is better than we were prepared to see it. In countries that are farther along, I'm thinking Israel, there's news that the vaccine doesn't just protect against disease, it largely shuts down
Arthur ain't down with racism.
On the other hand, the variants that you and Dr. Osterholm and others have warned about do indeed seem to be here in our country, and they do seem to be more contagious and perhaps more lethal. Talk about balancing those two buckets of information.
Thank you, Nicole, because, boy, that's exactly the issue we need to be talking about right now. We're in a time of real confusion, and it's justifiable that the average American is feeling like they're getting mixed messages. Things are kind of goofy. They can't figure out, should they be very scared or not scared at all or somewhere in between. You know, just 3 weeks ago when we were sort of demarcating this arbitrary alleged one-year anniversary of the epidemic, the news was full of past tense stories. It was as if the whole pandemic was suddenly in our rear view mirror and we could all lollygag off into the sunset with smiles on our faces. And then, of course, we've had spectacular success rolling out the vaccines. You know, on Saturday,
I'm not very fond of racists, sir.
Vaccinated in one day. That's amazing.
I might be playing a white guy, but I'm a black person.
To be excited about, but there is also a great deal that is nerve-wracking, fingernail biting. The reason that CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said she saw gloom and doom on the horizon. And that is because, first of all, we have surging variant strains, not one, not
only
two,
the black guy
three,
trying to
not
help you.
six. A whole array of different variants from all over the world, and some homegrown ones, such as we have here in New York City.
robberies commit.
The India variant that seems to
sorry,
be
Asian man.
this huge surge of COVID in both India and Bangladesh is a double mutation, and it has shown up now in San Francisco. The terrible variant that is sweeping across
now, Eugene.
and is at least partially why Brazil
Since you're a racist,
has the #1
think I'll feed you to a gator.
tolls in the world right now. Brazil's variant has shown up in Boston and in the Massachusetts area. And boy, Michigan is fighting out of control spread. And this is really being driven by the UK variant, the so-called B117, which is a rapid transmitter. So we have this mixed picture where justifiably people are confused. Are we supposed to read this as a time of danger, as a time of joy?
Eugene.
Illustrating that, Nicole, this weekend, the holiday weekend, saw two big changes.
Eugene.
One, we went back to 2019 levels of airplane traffic across the nation, and this movie Godzilla vs. Kong took in almost $49 million in 2 days, and that was people in the seats in movie theaters.
That is a remarkable way to look at human behavior, which I want to ask you another question, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I asked you about what we missed, and you talked about how scientists missed the variable of a president's speech on behavior.
Alligator.
I want to pick up that thread on the other side of a break. Don't go anywhere. Much more.
Oh, poor Eugene. Be nice to black folks.
When you earn a degree with the University of Phoenix, we support you with career coaching for life, including personal branding, resume building, and more. That's our promise to you. That's career services for life. Learn more at phoenix.edu.
Let me run to the bathroom.
What's worse, having erectile dysfunction or having to talk about it? You'd be surprised how many men I've talked to that struggle with that choice. And it's why I started Roman, because getting help shouldn't be difficult. With Roman, we've made it easy to connect with a healthcare professional online. They'll work with you to find the right treatment plan, and if prescribed, your medication will ship discreetly to your door. Simple, straightforward, and the way healthcare should be. Roman, let's take care of it.
Weldon is reinventing men's basics, and it all starts with more comfortable underwear. That means underwear made with soft, breathable, moisture-wicking fabrics, targeted cool zones, waistbands that won't roll over, and legs that won't ride up. We're confident our underwear is more comfortable than what you've got on right now. So confident, in fact, that we came up with this guarantee. If you don't love your first pair, it's on us. Try a pair at MacWeldon.com.
I'm Dr. James Beard Harden, expert in the history of athlete skincare. Let me show you my museum. In the beginning, athletes did what they could with rocks, donkey milk, nothing at all, or products with weird ingredients. These athletes had it tough. Now we have Art of Sport, high-performance skincare without the weird stuff.
Art of Sport, buckle hard, stay fresh.
We've always thought of great athletes as the strongest, the fittest, chiseled to perfection. What's a strong body without a sound mind? We're so focused on strength that we forget to strengthen our focus. The mind is like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it becomes. And while the greats master the body, the greatest master the mind.
I'm German. I hate wasting time. When I was shopping for car insurance, I spent hours trying to find the best deal. That's why I created Gabi. Gabi is a free tool that does the shopping for you. Gabi analyzes your existing policy and finds you the best rate for the same coverage. Within minutes, Gabi shows you quotes that would have taken hours to get on your own. And it works. Gabi users save more than $800 per year on average. Go to Gabi.com and stop overpaying for car insurance.
Oh yeah, you do. We're back with Lori Garrett. Lori, something I've wanted to ask you about now for weeks. I remember, and it was so marked in my brain, the conversation we had about the variables that scientists and folks like yourself couldn't predict forward. And that was basically an American president who denied the severity and lethality of the pandemic, except of course in private with Bob Woodward. If you look at the number and the makeup of the most vaccine-hesitant group, they're white Republican men who self-identify as Trump supporters. Does science again have to make up for the flaws and what is broken in our politics there?
Well, the other group that just new data shows is very, very resistant to getting vaccinated is white evangelicals, running about 40%, saying under no circumstances will they get the vaccine. And we can see that there's a confluence of issues playing out here. There's, if you're a follower of QAnon, if you are a skeptical, a very conservative white male, and if you are a Christian evangelical, all of those are risk factors for refusing vaccination. It's an ideological morass that has nothing to do with the vaccine itself and with what its relative efficacy and safety. And frankly, we now have so many vaccines out the pipeline. More than a dozen are in use somewhere in the world right now. And they show a range of efficacy, but they're amazing.